Have you ever been absolutely miserable while you've been traveling? Yep. I'm not talking about you were traveling and got caught in the rain and so, oh gosh, now I'm soaking wet and whatever. I'm talking like we should be having a wonderful time. Right. Like I'm traveling and things should be going really, really well, and me individually or the people that I'm traveling with, we found a way to be miserable anyways because we're just incredible at finding ways to just be miserable. Even when we should be doing something that's really fun and exciting. Have you ever had an experience like that? How just crushing and depressing that would be to go, we're here to have a good time. We're here to have fun. We're here to relax, and we're not able to do any of those things. Last summer, Stanzi and I took a 10-year anniversary / baby moon trip to St. Croix, and overall we had just a wonderful, blessed, incredible trip. We'll love to go back. Fantastic trip. But there was one time we'd sort of driven over to the west side of the island in order to see, some sightseeing point or something. And then we were leaving there, and on the way back, Stanzi was like, I want to take the main highway back. We'll get back to the hotel in like 15 minutes. And I was like, well, I really would like to take the sort of scenic route. It's not all the way inside the interior of the island, but there's like a little, special scenic route that sort of, connects the highways, but we see some stuff along the way. And she's like, oh gosh, I really don't want to, but fine, whatever, we'll do your thing. We'll get there in 30 minutes instead of 15. Well, we start driving along this road, and it's going slower than we thought it would because there had been some hurricanes a couple years ago, and the road hadn't really been repaired. But we're making progress. Okay, it's going to be 45 minutes instead of 30. And finally we're traveling along, and just our mutual agitation about the situation is just growing. And finally we come on to a place where there's a little intersection, this foresty road, and Cynthia looks at the map, and she's like, turn right here. Just turn right. This road is going to cut us directly back out to the main road, and we'll go, I'm done driving on the scenic route. And I was like, I really think we should stay on the scenic route, or we should just turn around and go back to the highway. And she was like, no, turn right here. So I turned right, and we drove about 300 feet, and it was an immediate, devastating mistake. This was like a deep interior road through the middle of St. Croix, incredible grade of steepness, going downhill, just snaking back and forth over and over again, all dirt, not paved at all, and water had just rushed out. I bet these 2 to 3 foot divots over and over again in the road. And we went down and made around one turn and realized that the whole road was going to be like that and even worse. And the road was so steep, I was like, I cannot put this Ford Explorer in reverse and get back up here. I've never been so scared in my life. It's like the sun is setting, it's becoming dark. We have nothing else to do than to go down this road. This car is not built to do this. And we're going down, the grade is so steep, I'm trying to give it a little speed on the way around because I'm afraid the car's going to roll as we're rolling over, right? And then finally we go down 3 or so turns, and we're like, oh my gosh, finally at least people will be able to find us if we get stuck. And of course we look at our phones and we have no cell phone service. And in that moment, it would have been wonderful to just have been on the same team, to be like, we're going to make it through this together. But of course we spent the first 25 minutes like, whose fault is this? And finally we're just like, we should just be done talking. We're just going to be quiet and silent. And fortunately, by God's grace, after about 12 of those back and forths, I bet it took us an hour to drive very slowly, probably a half a mile stretch of road. We made it down out to where the map said it should end up, which is the main road, and we drove back. And as we were driving back, we just drove in silence all the way. And as we were getting back to the hotel, Stanzi said, we're never talking about this for the rest of this trip. We're just not talking about it. Just move on. The rest of the trip's going to be great. We're going to move on. Traveling, it's so interesting. Why is it difficult to travel with other people? We've had trips where we've traveled with other people, and it's just been wonderful and amazing. But there are other times when, I hear people talk to me, I'm going to take a trip with friends. It's going to be wonderful. And have you ever traveled with friends before? Well, let's see what this will be like for you. Who knows? Because really a lot of strange stuff happens when you travel with other people. Traveling brings out things in us that we didn't really realize were there. And so people we have wonderful relationships with in another situation in life, we start to travel with them. And oh my gosh, people can become just incredibly difficult. Why can traveling just bring out the worst in people? Traveling is physically stretching, right? We actually really don't like change. And travel is just full of change. So people are either traveling because they have to, or because they really, really, really want to. And just those heightened experiences of physical exhaustion, but also just my spiritual desire. I'm traveling because I really wanted to, and now the stakes are really high and all the conversation. Where are we eating? What are we doing? Where are we going? The stakes are just really, really high in situations of physical exhaustion. But aside from the fact that they're physically challenging and emotionally and relationally challenging, physical travel reveals to us the way in which we are not good at spiritual travel. Because physical travel puts us in positions where the primary thing we need to be able to do is travel in our spirits to a place of grace for somebody else. Or to travel in our spirits to a place of rest so we can stop and take a deep breath. And this heightened experience of challenge that we go through when we travel physically reveals the fact that we're bad travelers spiritually. We're not able to move into the spiritual places that we need to do in order to be able to travel well. And so often people are not able to do this. I want to ask you a question. If I were to be able to sit down with God, would God say that you are a fun person to travel with? Would God be like, we just have incredible journeys together. We go to the most amazing places, and this person, this child of mine, this friend of my son, is just such a wonderful person to travel with. Or is it like, we're sort of just planning our own itinerary for our lives, and we're kind of maybe dragging God along in some religious way. Like, oh God, you're coming with me. I'm choosing here, 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 and here, but I'm just going to drag you along, God and me and myself, the Trevi Fountain, whatever it is, just sort of pulling him along wherever it is I'm going. What would God say about what kind of a travel companion you are? How is your travel through this life going? Do you often find that people want to be willing companions with you in the way that you travel? Why are our journeys through this life so hard? Why are we just not good at traveling? These are the questions we're going to be asking today. I've titled today's sermon, Invisible Travel. We're in the middle of a sermon series called Invisible Things. We live in a time today where in the modern Western world, belief in things that we can't see, just increasingly it seems, with every study and every year, every Pew research, whatever, just every year, people are like, yeah, angels, heaven, God, no, I don't believe in those things. I don't believe in things that I can't see. But the Bible says that there are all sorts of things that are real, that are spiritual entities, that are living and operative in this reality that we encounter all the time. And Colossians is a book in particular that is full of them. Our text today is going to be Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 to 14. The text is up on the screen. Thank God I remembered. The text is up on the screen so that you can know, so you can flip there yourself in your Bible, in your device, whatever it is. I encourage you to open something up so that you can flip to this passage. We've got Bibles over there. If you need them, you can take a Bible home with you. Again, the text is Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 to 14. I'll read the text aloud. And so, from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will and all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to Him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. May you be strengthened with all power, according to His glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy, giving thanks to the Father, who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Your life is made up of the trips you take. Your life is made up of the trips you take. Paul, right here at the beginning in Colossians chapter 10, says, so as to walk. He is concerned with the reality of the Colossians moving from place to place. What is walking? What is it to walk? Yes, sure, it's a physiological reality of picking up one foot and setting it down in front of the other, but walking is just the basic way that we move from place to place in the world. And this, honestly, is just the stuff of our lives. If we were to add up all of our trips, all of the really small, minuscule ones, and all the really big ones, we would have told the story of our life. And I'm talking really small, minute things like just the daily moving about of my apartment from one place to another. I'm talking about things that are a little bit bigger than that, like traveling around my neighborhood or my city. I'm talking about moving places physically from one location to a next. And also I have a large version of travel in my mind where we maybe go somewhere very far away. All of these things are trips that we take. Tiny ones in our daily lives to really big ones that we plan for and go large distances. And the trips and the travel that we do make up our lives. Our lives are made up of moving from place to place to place. And one large kind of this is travel. What is the definition of travel? Let's think about travel specifically for a moment. Oxford Languages defines travel as to go from one place to another, typically over a distance of some length. Now, maybe in Paul's context in Colossians here, we might think that that's not what he's referring to when he says walk, but that would be to not fully understand the ancient context. Obviously, Paul is doing all sorts of little moving around to his day by walking, but one of the major methods of traveling large distances in the ancient world was you walked it. You just walked. You didn't get on a train. Some people who were wealthy had options to different things. Paul, at certain moments in his life, is able to pay to ride a boat. But the majority way that people are traveling long distances is they're walking over the course of many days or weeks with a lot of provisions brought along with them in a large party so that they're able to make the journey safely together. This is the primary way that Jesus traveled. When he traveled from place to place, he primarily walked it. Sometimes he got into a boat and sailed around the Sea of Galilee, but primarily he walked. And so travel is for sure on the table here in this text when Paul's talking about walking, if we situate it in the ancient context. Now let's think for a second. Why generally and historically do people travel? Why do people travel? Just if we were to look over the broad swath of human history, we might see a number of different major reasons. Sort of generally, people might travel to visit family or people that they know and love who are far away. People travel routinely across the history of the world for political reasons, for international relations reasons. A second major category that has occasioned travel over the course of the history of the world is hardship. Others need help, or I need help, but I can no longer stay here, and so I have a particular kind of travel that I undertake to move on from the place that I'm in. These are general reasons why people travel throughout the history of the world. Of course, in the modern Western world, we've invented a totally new way to travel and a totally new reason for travel that really, in a popular way, has not existed in the history of the world, and that is travel that is not motivated by general concerns or not motivated by hardship, but travel that's motivated by me. Traveling for me. This is a major way that travel is animated in the Western world today. People travel just for me. Right? We often call this kind of travel tourism, where I have needs for myself that I'm going to meet just generally by traveling. Not immediate physiological needs, but needs that are existential in myself. There are at least 3 phrases that exist in the Western world that are sort of reflective of this form of travel that we've created, that's travel for me. One phrase is the phrase, I just need to get away. I just need to get away. I can't rest here. I can't relax here. I've seen too much of the same old stuff, and I need to get away. And the world out there is full of places and experience and people that are going to feel different from me and distant to me, and I just need to get away and out of my same old, I got to get out of there, and so I'm going to travel. I just need to get away. A second one is, I want to expand my horizons. I want to expand my horizons, and so I want to travel. I want to see things I haven't seen, and I want to learn things I haven't learned, experience things I haven't experienced, and there's something about that is like adding to me. It's making me bigger. It's making my vision of the world larger. And this is a sentiment that in the modern Western pluralistic world that we live in is viewed particularly positively. The idea that you would travel such that your horizons can be enlarged. And of course, there's an element of that is good, but it's not necessarily built in that is going to be a good experience for you. This sentiment is so prevalent in the modern Western world that a major American writer wrote this many years ago about travel. He said, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. And that's a wonderful sentiment. It just is obviously patently false. It is true that if I already, in my internal disposition, am open to overcoming my bigotry, travel is a wonderful opportunity to watch that happen. But if I, in my own internal location, lean towards bigotry or looking down on other people, travel is going to become an insidious opportunity for me to get more opportunities to look down on other people. This is obviously factually true, and it's proven by just the history of empires. It is. Empires are international structures where a dominant culture is traveling all over the world, and they keep spreading their empire because every single group of people they meet, they go, "You're doing it worse than we are." Travel is not on its own an inoculation against bigotry as much as we might like the sentiment that it does. Travel becomes an opportunity to increase either a sort of pro-prejudice or an anti-prejudice disposition that exists already in my spirit. A third thing that we say, along with "I just need to get away," where I am, I've lost myself, I don't know where I am, I'm not here. And the weird thing is that that is just devastatingly close to the truth, that you're not here. In a ironic and painful twist, this particular approach, if I'm going to find myself, interprets that truth in a faulty way, where instead of recognizing that what I need is an experience of change in here that's going to modify my experience of out there, we think that I'm going to go out there and have an experience that's going to change me somehow in here. And that's exactly backwards. These three phrases, "I just need to get away, I want to expand my horizons, I'm going to find myself," are ways in which we justify traveling for me in the world today. And the real problem here just really is this. I know we love to travel in this room. People love to travel. We've been enriched by travel. You're New Yorkers, you're working your butt off so that you can just travel for a second, at one moment during the year. And of course, there are wonderful things about traveling where we get back a good physical rhythm of travel as we order it rightly against the spiritual travel that we need to be able to do. That's always the problem. Like when something in the physical and in the world and in the created order begins to go wrong, it's because we're trying to use it to meet a spiritual need. That's when it becomes a problem. If we meet the spiritual need through spiritual sources, we get the physical thing back in the manner in which we're supposed to have it. So it's not that travel is bad, it's that we use it to medicate the wrong things. And really, here's just the problem definitionally with this sort of travel for me. It's not actually able to take you anywhere. It doesn't take you anywhere. Yeah, I know, you step off a ship and go see somewhere new, or you do the Airbnb thing, but you come back to where you already were from, the same person that you were when you left. You didn't go anywhere as a person. It doesn't take you anywhere. A philosopher from the University of Chicago recently wrote an article about this called "The Case Against Travel" in The New Yorker. I will say, in our culture and time, a deeply unpopular article, but I think very philosophically thoughtful. You see what you think about this paragraph. "The single most important fact about tourism is this: we already know what we will be like when we return. A vacation is not like immigrating to a foreign country or matriculating at a university or starting a new job or falling in love. We embark on those pursuits with the trepidation of one who enters a tunnel not knowing who she will be when she walks out. The traveler departs confident that she will come back with the same basic interests, political beliefs, and living arrangements. Travel is a boomerang. It drops you right where you started." This is the real issue. The sort of travel that I pursue that is built on me and glorifying me and enlarging me and meeting my own needs doesn't actually take me anywhere. It drops me right back off in the same place that I always was at. And this is the issue. If your life is made up of the trips you take, and you have a method of traveling that doesn't take you anywhere, you are by definition living a life that's not going anywhere. You're living a dead-end life. And that is a huge problem. And you feel it in your life every time you wake up and go, "Where am I going? What am I doing? Why isn't my life adding up to anything?" You feel the spiritual pain of not going anywhere because this kind of traveling and moving about, and I will say traveling through life in the world, the way I'm wandering through the journey of my own life in a way that's all about me, it's built to not be able to take me anywhere. It's built to boomerang me back into the same situations, the same pains, the same frustrations, the same anxieties, over and over and over again. And for how many of you has that proved to be true? That when we're traveling through life in a way where I am at the center of the trips that I'm taking throughout my life, I do confess that it's just factual that over time I boomerang back through the same stuff over and over and over again. I'm not actually going anywhere new. This is the issue when we're traveling in a way that is centered about me. But when the travel of our life and the journey of my life is animated by God and it's around God, it becomes a form of travel that is able to take me to new places. We go to new places when we travel with God. Colossians 1:10 continues with these words. So as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to Him. This is describing a kind of travel that is created in my life that is about the worthiness of the Lord and not the worthiness of myself. It's about pleasing the Lord and not pleasing myself. And when we get these things, our travel becomes animated by three different, to use the technical term, participial phrases than the ones that we just described. Three different ing phrases, right? Getting away, expanding my horizons, finding myself. Verses 11 and actually later in 10 and then through 12 also have three ing phrases. Three participial phrases that describe what it looks like when we are walking and journeying through life in a way that's about God and not about ourselves. Travel that is about God rather than being about getting away or expanding my horizons and finding myself is first in verse 10 about growing and increasing. That actually is something that if it were to be happening in our journey through life, it would lead us to new places. And what are we growing and increasing in verse 10? Growing in goodness and the knowledge of God. That there's a way of traveling when we're oriented around God where I'm growing. And I'm actually growing in things that are not just for me, they're for other people. Who's primarily the beneficiary of my goodness? The person next to me, my neighbor, the person that I do business with. They're the beneficiary of my goodness. And this is something that comes up when we begin to travel in and through our lives in a way that's about God. The second participial phrase shows up here in verse 11. May you be strengthened with all power. The ESV here is rendering it without the ing because it would be awkward. It says something like strengthening in strength, so that you can endure. But it's still right there, the word's strengthened. And what are you being strengthened into? Endurance. You need endurance when you travel. You would actually be able to go to new places and experience new things if you had endurance in your travel. How often are those, in literal trips that we take, how often are those painful moments born from a lack of endurance? I just couldn't endure with that person for another second. I just couldn't endure with that weather. I couldn't endure with that. I wanted the weather to be different. The weather sucked. I couldn't endure it. How much of newness in travel would we have if we had endurance? This text says that when you go with God and not primarily with and for yourself, you gain endurance. You're being strengthened in endurance. And finally, you go in thankfulness. Verse 12, giving thanks, literally just thanking the Father. And instead of a version of travel, it's about me and getting my needs met and all this stuff, I go in gratitude, thankful just for the travel that I'm experiencing literally or through life. And what kind of a difference does gratitude make when you're actually traveling? I mean, how often do we go and travel somewhere and it's just the whole system is built to make us feel this way. We put in the request for the time off at work, we save the money, we book the stuff, and it just has to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. And we're not able to be there and just enjoying what's happening because something doesn't live up to what we planned for, what we paid for, and now our trip is in the process of being ruined. Gratitude would solve that whole thing. Being able to go in a spirit of gratitude would solve that whole situation, where if something's there that didn't live up to the way that you want it to go, you could go, you know what? It's just great to be able to be here. I'm just thankful for the opportunity to be here. And not only would that cover over that one thing that's disappointing you, it would free the rest of your trip from being destroyed by that one disappointment. Growing in goodness, being strengthened, thanking God. These are elements of travel that we bring to the table when our travel is not built on ourselves, it is built on God. And when we travel in this way with God, we then actually are able to go to new places internally. We go to new invisible places in ourselves that we can't see. We begin to have access to them because we're actually open to being changed ourselves by what we're experiencing. And this is the big secret. This is what physical travel is actually all about. It's not actually about getting out to a new place. It's about going somewhere different so that my eyes are opened, so that when I return, I realize I never knew really the place that I was actually from. That's what travel is actually about. This is what G.K. Chesterton, a famous Catholic thinker from London, input the word London, says here about travel. He says this: do you suppose that I go to France in order to see France? Do you suppose that I go to Germany in order to see Germany? I shall enjoy them both, but it's not them that I'm seeking. I'm seeking London. The whole object of travel is not to set foot on a foreign land. It is at last to set foot on one's own country as a foreign land. We don't really see the place where we're at, ourselves or the things and people around us, because our vision is shrouded by the idea that they're common or that we've seen it all. And once we begin to believe that in our lives, that I've seen it all in my life around me, our life is just the walking dead. What we need to be able to do is to travel places without actually going anywhere. We need to be able to recognize that in the place that I'm at, there's things I haven't seen. Internally, in my internal life, there are places I haven't gotten to and places that I haven't been. This is what we actually need, because the contingencies of this world are such that you don't know how many times you're going to visit new places for the rest of your life. You don't know that. You think right now that the world is your oyster. At any moment, that could change, and your control over being able to go to new places could end. And the reality is that you still need to know on a spiritual level that my life is going somewhere. You still need to feel like my life has movement. You still need to feel like my life is traveling to a destination, even when you're out of control of the physical places that you are visiting. This is, at the end of the day, the reality. The physical travel that we do is a good and wonderful blessing, but it's not the bedrock of my life. But like your life does depend on your ability to be going somewhere internally. It absolutely does. And your lived sense of my life being meaningful and valuable is intimately linked to the sense that my life is going somewhere. This is what the goal of physical travel actually is. And of course, physical travel cannot actually accomplish this for us. It can't make us able to go somewhere without going somewhere. But spiritual travel can. Spiritual travel and travel with God is able to make us able to go different places without changing the specificity of my life. We go, for example, to the place of joy. Or we go to the place of grace. We go to the place of life and vivifying action. We go to the place of love. And we become able through spiritual travel to actually go to different invisible places, even when we're not going anywhere in the world. The Bible says that the world is full of these invisible places, and the Bible says that it is good for us to be able to be there. For example, probably the most famous psalm in Psalm 23 says that God takes us to particular places. Right? In Psalm 23, what does it say? Green pastures and quiet waters. What are these? Signs of spiritual places of provision, the place of provision or the place of peace. And you need desperately to be able to travel to spiritual places in your life. Because when you are scared, you need to know where you can climb the mountain of courage. And when you feel like a failure, you need to know where you can dig your feet into the sandy shores of an ocean of grace. When you feel like you don't belong, you need to know where you can go and lay down in the pasture of love and peace, where you are safe and welcomed and protected. Isn't it true that your daily life and experience is not dependent on the physical places you can go, but your ability to access spiritual places of love and grace and hope and courage and belonging, that if you had them, you would never feel lost or wandering in the world? You need to be able to go to invisible places. At their best, the visible ones are trying to teach you this. But you need to be able to access the spiritual places that God is longing for you to visit. How do we get there? How do we get to spiritual places? How do we get to any place generally? There are a number of things that we might say in response to this, but one thing that is for sure needed in order to arrive at any destination is object permanence. We need to be able to see the destination, and even in moments when we lose sight of it physically, to still have its reality operating in the background system of our lives and of our traveling so that we can course correct and ultimately get there. Right? There's no version of travel that we do where our eyes are just linked on the physical thing itself all the time and we're just following it. We need object permanence so that when we lose sight of that destination, we actually haven't lost real sight of it because we know in the background where I'm going, it's there even though I don't see it, and I'm going to keep course correcting until I arrive there. Object permanence is a lived skill that some of the members of my household are currently developing right now. Object permanence is the ability of a sufficiently developed brain to be able to know that that thing is still there even when I'm not looking at it, and my delightful, joyful, chatty, 8.5-month-old son is working on object permanence. And he's got a journey, he's got a trip that he takes with me every morning from about 7 to 8:30, where we start in the kitchen, and he's on the floor in the kitchen, and he's got the scooting thing down. He hasn't figured out the leg part of it yet, aside from pushing off his back foot so intensely, he gives himself a big blister back there. But his arms are just like, he's like, just army crawling it. He feels like such a champ. And what I'll do is we start in the kitchen, I'll walk down the hall, and down the hall, there's a guest room on the right, and there's a bathroom that has shiny things in it. Straight down the hall. And what I'll do is I'll walk down the hall, and then I'll pop over into the guest room, and I'll pop my head out and catch his attention and go, boo! And he'll see me and go, ah! And then he'll start crawling towards me. And then I'll duck away. And I'll pop out again, and he'll see me and go, boo! And he remembers that I'm there all over again. Now here's the thing. If I take too long in the pop back out moments, as soon as I disappear, he sees the shiny cat food and cat water bowl that are in the bathroom. And he is just not able to overcome the physical sensation of just going shiny. And boom, he's on his way there. He's forgotten that I exist. I've got to keep popping out and be like, object permanence, I'm still here. This is why you started the journey in the first place, was to come visit me. And as he gets closer, the shiny cat food is right there. And of course, if you don't stop him in time, he just grabs it and, whips it around and creates a huge mess. Right? But in order to arrive at that destination, the guest room where I'm at, he needs to be able to have object permanence of me. He needs to be able to remember, oh yeah, this is where I'm going because that guy's in that room, even though I can't see him, I'm going to turn right here instead of going straight to the siren song of the shiny cat food bowl. Right? He needs to be able to do that. What is your spiritual object permanence like? Our brains are all here developed. We've got physical object permanence. Isn't it true that our spirits in this area are woefully underdeveloped and we do not have spiritual object permanence to be able to reliably continue in the same direction because I saw that truth about God in faith and I'm holding on to it because I know it's there even when I don't see it directly in this moment, and so my course is unchanged and undiminished and uncorrected because I'm going in this same direction. What is the quality and character of our spiritual object permanence? To be able to know that a good place and pasture of God is there, and so I should keep going on that direction and not change course. We cannot afford to lose the object permanence functionality even for a moment if we're going to actually end up at a destination. We go out of the way and take detours and backtrack and get lost so quickly. And so we have to be able to have in our spiritual lives a sense of spiritual object permanence so that we don't lose sight of the spiritual destinations that we're longing for. When something's going on in our lives that's making us feel like a failure, instead of just saying, what more things can I do to try to fill up my feeling of failure, to be able to say, there's a place of grace that I could go to that would get me out of my performative cycle and would instead minister grace to me. I would lay down in a pasture of grace. That's what I'm going to walk towards. That's where I'm going to go in this experience, and I'm not going to lose sight of it. That's what we need to be able to do. And of course, It's true that we should long for that sense of spiritual object permanence to grow, for the sight and the hold that we have on things to remain longer over time as our faith grows. But it is also true of humans that we're never in our own strength and on our own going to be able to hold on to the sight of an invisible thing long enough and with enough perfection such that we will arrive at that destination every time. We're fighting our own nature. We're fighting the things that go wrong in us. We're fighting just our basic fallibility and weaknesses that we have that aren't even our own fault. They're just built in. We are not able to reach spiritual places reliably because we can't see them and hold on to them for long enough to finish the journey of getting there. We don't just need to be able to see them. We need to be moved into those things by somebody else. How are we ultimately going to reach spiritual places? We need someone to move us there on our behalf. Someone who is able and powerful to both pay our way for the journey and to faithfully transport us from one place to the next. And praise God, this is what He's done in His Son, Jesus Christ. He has become a captain of the travel that we take in our lives to faithfully move us and translate us and transpose us from one location to the next when you and I are not able to get there ourselves. God has traveled you from the realm of darkness into the kingdom of His Son. Colossians 1:13 says this, He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His Son. This word here, transferred, means, it's got a variety of meanings. It can mean change generally. It can also mean a moving from place to place. To be totally honest, when it talks about a moving from place to place, it's probably referring to a negative removal, but just bear with me and let me just really tie this thread up. God didn't just transpose you. He didn't just translate you. He didn't just transfer you. He travels you from a kingdom of darkness into a kingdom of light. The ultimate place of spiritual moving that you need. To be removed out from a spiritual location where you are in, where you feel lost and darkened and depressed and like nobody cares and like nobody loves you. The thing is it doesn't matter how much medication from the world you get while you're in that spiritual place. That spiritual place is built to make you feel that way. Its furniture is uncomfortable when you sit down. It condemns you as you sit in the chairs it's built up. And the vista out the window is the vista of your failures. It's a whole place where the architecture is built to make you arrive there and then make you feel dead and lost and hopeless. And Jesus Christ has walked into that place and He has traveled you out of it into a new place, a new spiritual location of light, where you know that you are loved and you see the vista of God's grace for you, and you sit down and lie down in peace. Jesus has moved you from one location to the next. There is a place and time and way in which we can wake up to this reality in this life where we realize I've traveled to place after place after place, and I'm never fully at home. Like Odysseus of the Odyssey, we're on some long journey, sitting down on a number of different islands that could be stopping spots, but just can't get the itch out of our spirit that I am not yet at home. It's because you aren't. You aren't home until you are at home in your heavenly home with God. And the most important journey you'll ever take is a spiritual one, from the realm of darkness into the realm of light. Jesus has done two things to move you and to travel you from one place to the next. The first thing that He's done is He's paid your way. Colossians 1:14 says, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. We miss this in modern English, but really in the Hebrew, if we were to go back in the context, the word redemption has an economic context. It's talking about a sort of economic redemption, either through money paid or land exchanged hands or some other function where I'm provided for economically. So to talk about redeeming has that sort of, even those e-vowels, has like the shimmering of coins in it. It's like a paid for redemption, to pay a redemption price for you. And every single trip that we take has a cost. And in paying for your redemption, Jesus has paid the cost of the trip from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. You and I cannot pay the cost that it would take to travel from one spiritual location to the next, especially from darkness to light. We are often blind to how incredible the cost is. This isn't like, I can sort of, scrounge together enough money to like ride economy. Those other people were good religious people. They're in Comfort Plus. The saints are up in first class. Whatever. You and I can't even afford to be stowed away in the cargo hold. The cost is so incredible, and Jesus Christ paid that cost with the sacrifice of his body and his blood so that you could afford the ticket to get on this train and move out from a place of spiritual death. Jesus has paid your way. The second thing, however, that Jesus has done is he captains the trip so that you can be sure that if you are just following him, you will make the journey safely. The New King James Version of Hebrews 2:10 says this, "For it was fitting for him," for Jesus, "for whom are all things and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings." Most translations render this word captain pioneer, which still has the idea of the leader of a journey, but I like the rendering captain better. The captain of our journey of faith and our traveling into salvation has been made so worthy by the fact that he endured during his own traveling here, that he's become a worthy captain for your journey. Right, as we said before, so many of our traveling and our trips go awry because we just can't endure the hardships. We just can't. All of our cracks in our nature and our failures in our character, they're just on display as hardships beset our travel. But this text here says that Jesus endured his sufferings in such an exemplary way that his sojourn from heaven to earth vindicated his ability to make the trip. And as a result, he's able to lead you in your own trip from earth to heaven. Jesus has paid the way, and he's proven himself able to make the trip. And so Jesus, even now, is just traveling Jacob's ladder, ascending and descending from heaven to earth over and over again, showing you, even now, how you, as you travel to spiritual places of grace and love and forgiveness and redemption, can begin to walk that ladder between heaven and earth now and know in your life that your life is going somewhere. You should believe in Jesus and travel to heaven now and into eternity. When we believe in Jesus, we gain access through the living power of the lived reality of faith to access the spiritual places that Jesus is even now preparing for us, the places of grace, the places of love, the places of redemption. This is what faith is built to do, to put me in touch now with the place that I otherwise would not be in touch with. This is what faith in Jesus would do for you. He knows the way. He's paid the way. You should believe in him and gain access to the spiritual places that he's created for you. Some of you might be saying, really, this is where this all ends up, faith? Really, that belief in just whatever I want to because I believe in it? That completely unreliable epistemological method that science has disproven? I can understand why you might think that way based on how the world talks about faith, but the world has discarded faith to its own peril. There are certain things that faith is exactly the proper epistemological method through which we come to contact with the reality that's mediating. And travel is one of them. All travel happens in faith. You simply don't have the vindication of the faith that caused you to travel until you get there. It doesn't matter who's been there, the witnesses you hear from. It doesn't matter the research that you're doing, all the images. Travel and arriving at a new destination is a certain sort of experience that is only ultimately fully vindicated by you putting your foot down on the place to which you're going. As a result of that, it always takes faith to begin the journey to any physical place that you're going to. If that's true with things in the world, how much more is it true with the things of God? That the traveling that we do in this world, when my faith is vindicated by arriving at a place I'd never been, that is meant to be a sign to tell you that when you believe in God, your faith will be vindicated and your foot will one day step onto a good shore of a place that you knew and trusted was there. That is what faith always does in our travel. And it happens for us spiritually when we believe in Jesus. How do you put that faith in action? To begin to start this journey with Jesus, well, you choose to. That doesn't mean that choosing to make my faith active is a work. It just means that at some point on a journey, I'm faced with multiple different paths. And I have to choose. And you today are faced with two diverging paths. A path of faith and a path of not faith. You have to choose which path you are going to walk. And this moment of decision, when two paths appear before you, is precisely the moment that the great American poet Robert Frost was referring to when he wrote his most famous poem. Two paths diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. And it makes all the difference for you, not just into your eternity, but into your ability to go places now in your life. When you take the narrow and less traveled road of faith, to trust that God has spiritual places in store for you. Believe in Jesus and travel on this path today. Amen.